Becoming rich isn't just about what you do, it's also about what you stop doing. To uncover the biggest traps holding people back, I sat down with Sara Davies, one of the UK's most brilliant business minds and a dragon from Dragon's Den. In the next few minutes, Sara shares the 7 mistakes that stop most people from ever becoming wealthy and how you can avoid them.
Most people I meet that are not making their dream happen are living above their means.
The biggest thing I hear from people when they want to start a business is, I don't have enough money to start a business, right? So when I first started Crafters Companion, I had the first product that I invented was an envelope making tool. People always find this amazing. How did you make your millions selling envelope making tools, right? You wouldn't think demand would be high enough. Trust me, you get something that people want, go and find your niche and you can own it. Anyway, so my dad's friend was he had a little joinery firm in the village and he made my prototypes in MDF for me. Then I went to a plastic moulding company in the northeast of England and had a quote to bring the product to market. 30 grand, right? So 30 grand. So I was thinking, I could ask my mum and dad to remortgage their home. I could somehow get an unsecured bank loan or whatever, but I'd be starting off 30 grand below. And I'd have to answer to someone, whether that was the bank manager, whether that was an investor. And this is the problem. A lot of people would stop there. But actually, there's always more than one way to skin a cat. So it wasn't perfect. But what we did is I got the guy in the village to make them out of MDF. Now, they were costing me a fortune each one, whereas the plastic ones were going to cost me 40, 50p. These were costing me a couple of quid. I was only making £1 profit on each one. But it meant I could get the product to market without having to go into debt. And then I sold 30,000 of these wooden enveloper MDF made tools, making £1 profit on each one. And then I used that to pay for the tool for this one. And actually, by the time I'd done that 3 months later, I'd already come up with the idea for the next product, the one that we called the Ultimate Crafter's Companion. But to have that tool was 100 grand. Well, I just kept selling enough of these till I'd saved up the 100 grand to get to that. And I always lived within my means.
So many amazing things about that. I think, again, loads of people say they need money to start a business. Mm-hmm. And, it's because they've seen Dragon's Den, actually. And they think, I know, I'll just go raise money.
Ask for more money. Yeah.
But actually, most of the time, most of the investments I've seen you make are people that have already kind of gone and made it happen, often with no debt, right? If you can, and you've got market fit. Living above your means, I would also say, I'm going to guess, when you were doing it, your costs were low in lifestyle. So
very low.
Yeah.
But I think that the thing is, I grew up in a really entrepreneurial family, but we didn't have much money growing up. I was the kid that had 4-stripe Adidas tracksuit bottoms. Right. And my school bag came from the car boot sale every year. We just didn't have a lot of money growing up. So I think that gave me that grounding and that real value.
A lot of young people that I meet that tell me their dreams, they want to move out and they want to, get their own apartment in London or whatever, and I'm like, I get why, but just try to stay at home for as long as you can until you've built something that brings you revenue that you love.
Yes.
Because as much as it's maybe not as exciting as getting a flat in London, you're going to have decades potentially, of your own place. And I think it's almost seen as a negative if you're still living at home, like you're judged. If I could have lived at home when I started my business, I definitely would have done it. I think that people now are made to feel guilty, young people in particular, as if somehow they should be renting a flat.
Which is ridiculous.
Yeah, and as soon as they do that, you've got to have a monthly income to pay the rent.
Yeah.
So how can you start something? How long before you actually took money out of your business? I'm going to guess it was a while.
It was a long time. And I can remember, so my husband, he was my childhood sweetheart. We've been together since I was 15. And so because he was a couple of years older than me, when I was going to university, he'd graduated and he chose to stay living at home so that he could save for the deposit on our first house. So that then when I graduated, he'd lived at home an extra 4 years that he needed to, so that we had a nice lump sum to be able to pay a deposit on the house. And actually, then he had a really good steady job, so he could afford to pay our mortgage, which meant I didn't have to contribute to our family income. Wow. So I took 10 grand a year out the business, which would pay towards bills and my living. I could live on that comfortably. Right. But that meant that everything I had could go back into business and I could grow that business faster. And it made such a difference. Like you say, whether it's living at home, whatever it is, try to always think, how can I save? It's only in the short term. Have your eye on the long term. For me, it was always I wanted to buy land and build our own house. Yeah. And at one day in the future, I'll do that when I'm successful. But right now, this is what we'll put up with because we're building something.
Delayed gratification. Yeah. Scientifically, it's one of the most powerful ways we can live. I think that leads us well into people that chase quick wins.
If it seems too good to be true, it probably is. To me, this is a really obvious one. If it was that easy, everybody would be doing it. Mm-hmm. That's what I always think, that everybody would be doing it. And for me, it's not just quick wins. My problem, and I think you'll probably get this as an entrepreneur, I get really excited about the shiny stuff. About the shiny, I'm like a magpie. And so in business, and it was especially true when I was younger, before I had the kids, I wanted to chase everything because everything was fun and everything was shiny. And actually it was Simon, my husband. So we worked in the business together for a lot of years. And Simon was that voice of reason behind the scenes. And instead of letting me go off and just chase every dream, he would make me, whatever it is I was looking at, I'd have to justify to him why we were going to spend time, effort, money, resource. And at first I used to think, well, if I'm not spending money on it, why does it matter? But I never thought of my time as being something that was a valuable resource. So because it was available in abundance, I would just work into the night or whatever. Whereas he got me really well into the discipline of being selective. And it's sometimes not the sexiest stuff and not the fun stuff, but it's that stuff that will underpin the growth in your business that you need to do is just slowly catch your monkey. So it's not just quick wins, but be really careful in what opportunities. One of the biggest things that someone taught me in business is it's as important to work out what you're not going to do as what you are going to do.
And how do you frame that up? If someone's listening and they're like, okay, I've got all these choices. A lot of people say to me they've got 3 or 4 different ideas they want to launch. How do you decide what to say no to and say yes to? Is there any framework?
I like to understand what's it going to take to make it successful, both financially and also the effort that needs to go into something, and what's the return on investment. And don't ever just look at the return on investment as being cash and monetary return on investment. It's a monetary on time investment as well. And you'll start and learn this as well as you get more staff. I was forever somebody who wanted to tip things in at the top. And I remember saying to my staff, I need to trust that you understand that I'm an entrepreneur. I'm going to keep chucking stuff in at the top. I expect you to be able to work out what's in the machine and either what's not important enough that doesn't get done anymore, or what's the compromise that we're making, or that you're going to come back to me and say, Sarah, if we're doing this new thing on top of all of these other things, this is the extra resource that we need. You're not just going to tip other stuff in at the top and then run yourself ragged trying to do everything. I said, I've got to trust that you will do that calculation as I keep chucking ideas in at the top, because that's what I am. I'm an ideas person. I need you to be the engine that works behind it as well.
Your book, by the way, people want to buy it. The link's down below. But I think writing a book is a big undertaking.
Writing a book is not something people do as a get-rich-quick scheme. What it was for me is I'm a big storyteller. I tell stories for everything. I like a fable. I like to understand. And I remember doing quite a lot of corporate speaking, and someone once said to me, you've got so many stories, Sarah. You need to write them down. You need to write them all down. And so what we did was we took 52 stories from my life of things that have happened in my life and boiled them down so you could do a chapter a week and just one lesson a week. And then we figured, entrepreneurs are pretty busy people. So if we could take it and distill it down into 6 minutes, so you could read a story about my life in 6 minutes, and then actually I'll give you a summary at the end that sums up what you should have learned from it. Everyone's got 6 minutes.
Everyone should. If they don't have 6 minutes, they've got a real problem.
You've got a problem.
Yeah. Well, on the concept of chasing quick wins, my story relates to this subject very well. The only business I've ever had that dramatically failed, I lost $1 million on this business, was a comic book business I tried to launch in China.
Right.
And basically, the reason it failed is because I got an investor. And that investor was like, let's just spend. It doesn't matter, let's invest. And I didn't think about, will I sell that comic book? Will it actually turn into a movie?
You just had loads of money.
We just spent the money, and I never worked hard enough on the end game of the revenue side until it was too late. And so I completely relate to this subject. It's so true. But again, for a lot of people listening, the problem is that you're hearing people talk about quick wins as if they're successful. Oh, crypto is a good one. People are making money in these things, and then they show you their fancy life or fancy car. But if they made it quick, they'll lose it quick. That's also been another experience I've seen.
So few and far between. But do you know what? That point plays right back to point number one about living above your means, doesn't it? It's artificial. You've got to put the time in to actually get there eventually.
But these points link together, because now we're going to talk about this leads into not getting started. A lot of people have good excuses for not starting. Money is one. People don't have enough money to start. You've already debunked that with make a prototype and sell it. I think the other thing I see is I was speaking to someone who's 42 and they're successful, but their kids are in private school. And they said to me they can't start because they've got to pay for private school for their kids. And I'm like, I believe kids don't do what you say, they do what you do. So are you living your dream? And they're like, no, I'm just doing the job to pay for those things. I said, that's what kids are going to learn from you. If you go live your dream, they will learn to live their dream. If you learn to make sacrifice for them, actually going to teach them that's the way to live. They're going to copy you. So how do we help people that are thinking, I'm not going to start? What do you think the kind of
mindset? It's all up here, right? everything you are saying about why you can't do it, every single part is an excuse.
Right.
So whether it's your friend who's saying he needs to put his kids through private school, whatever it is, everything you are saying is an excuse. If you really believe in yourself enough, and we'll come on to that later, if you really believe in yourself enough, you won't think that that's a risk. And all of these interplay with each other, not getting started, adversity to risk, believing in yourself, they all play into each other. But you're never, ever going to succeed if you don't get started in the first place. And trust me, the longer you put it off, the more comfortable you become in your life. The harder it is to do that. And I see so many people who are at a stage in their life where they're not really content with what they're doing, but they're far too comfortable to be able to ever walk away.
So if you're making an excuse, by the way, that money is the reason you can't start a business, we're giving away £15,000 with Adobe Express. All you have to do, and there's a link down below, is go click that link and fill out a pitch deck, a step-by-step guide that's free on what your business is, and we're going to pick one of you to win that money. If you aren't clearly stating your long-term vision for your idea, then it might be obvious that you have no vision. Luckily, with the Adobe Express Ultimate Pitch Deck, this is made super clear. And even better, you can remix the template to make it relevant to you so it's truly unique.
Your pitch deck needs to look amazing. What I've put together in Adobe Express is a starting point, but feel free to use Adobe stock images, experiment with fonts, and add icons or other elements that really make it pop. Let me show you the Generate Image tool in action. I'll type in this box called Businessman, and it will come up with a whole load of options. And if these aren't quite right, I can generate some more until I find the one that I want. Another great feature I want to show you is how you can generate text effects. So let's say your dream is to revolutionize the clothing industry. You could use this tool to create text that looks like denim, for example. So I'll type in old faded blue denim with holes in, and then it will come up with lots of options to choose from, just like the images.
This template is completely free and available for anyone to use. Just head to the link in the description. You can enter by creating a pitch deck using my template and entering via the HelpBnk Adobe Locked Space using the password DreamWithAdobe. An independent panel will judge your pitch deck, and one of you will win £15,000 to fund your dream. Full terms and conditions can be found in the HelpBnk Adobe Locked Space. Good luck. A lot of people don't take advantage of luck. I find in life. I don't know what your experience is that people think, I probably won't win. They won't even try to enter this sort of thing. What's your...
That's the whole not getting started point.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. You are going to give that £15,000 to someone.
Yeah.
Why could it not be that person?
I legally have to, by the way, yeah.
And if you watch at home and you don't fill out the form, you're right. It's never going to be you, right? But if everybody had that attitude, you'd have nobody to give the 15 grand to. I said earlier, I think I have an unhealthy relationship with risk. I never saw risk as being risk because I just always felt like the more risky something was, then potentially just the harder I'm going to have to work to make sure it works. And that was all right when it was just me. Or when I first started the company, it was me, and then me and my best friend's mum worked for us, and then me and my best friend's mum and my other best friend's little sister. It was just friends and family. And so when I was taking risks with the business, I would move like that because I would just think, if it all goes Pete Tong tomorrow, then I'll just work hard and build it back up again because, this time last month or this time last year, I didn't have any of this. So it never felt like a risk because I was just chasing after something and I was in control. I would just work harder to make up for something that didn't work. The difference is the more staff you get, the harder that is to juggle that risk because then I would look at those people and think, that's 20 mortgages get paid as a result of the decisions I make day to day.
Or don't get paid if you make a mistake. Yeah.
Maybe I need to think about this a little bit more before I do that. So I'm married to an accountant. So we are like chalk and cheese. So Simon, whereas I've got this massively unhealthy relationship with risk, he is like Mr. Managing all risks. So he balances me out a lot and challenges me on it. On everything I want to do, he's definitely the spectre at the feast, as it was. So it does make me think a lot more. But I just think if you're never prepared to take that little bit of risk, and don't ever mistake risk and luck, okay? I hate it when people say to me, you've been so lucky, Sarah. I think, funny that. I found the harder I work, the luckier I am. And it's that I'm prepared to take risks. And then the ones that haven't paid off, I just had to work 10 times harder to make up for the risk that I took to mitigate it within the business. And there's always a way to mitigate everything. You've got to it's a complete balancing act all the time.
What you've said there, I think you mitigate by figuring out what is the downside. Because you said something really interesting a minute ago. You were like, I could go back to nothing. It doesn't matter anyway. I had nothing.
Yeah.
So you were willing to risk it all. So your risk is you just go back to at the beginning. All right,
Yeah.
so what? But as you get more and more successful, that gets harder. I mean, I've got a kid now, so I have that, like, I can't sleep on my mate's couch. Which was kind of my mindset when I moved to Hong Kong. I slept on my mate's couch when I went to Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And so what's the risk? I'll go back to my mate's couch. You know, not good for him, probably not too bad for me. You know, when you're thinking about risk in general, that's why I think you have to start young.
Yes.
Because I think that as you get older, you do have, I want a holiday and I want to go, when I go on holiday, I have to stay in a villa now. I don't know what's happened to me.
You're so fancy.
I used to stay in like really awful places.
You used to sleep on your mate's couch.
Kind of, exactly, yeah.
Now he needs a villa.
Anywhere to have an adventure, right? But now, exactly, now with a pool. It has to have a pool as well.
It's getting worse.
And so it's getting worse. But I think when you're young, you know, like you don't have submersion yet as well. And I know it's really, really cliche, but that's one of the reasons I'm a bit against university at the moment. I'm fighting back because so many young people feel obliged to go to university.
Yeah.
Those 4 years are the years you can take the most risk because you can live at home. Your costs are low. You don't have high expectations. You're willing to backpack, right? You know, like that's the time to take risk, not get 50 grand worth of debt and learn stuff that's not even going to give you a future.
So to me, Crafter's Companion was the side hustle I started while I was at uni.
Right. Oh, I didn't know that. Okay,
so I did that in my last year of university. Right. So I graduated with the business ready to go. And I always say that is the one thing that I feel really lucky to have done. You know, I didn't have any dependents. I didn't have a mortgage to pay. There was no risk to me. I could just, you know, tomorrow it could be all be gone and I would be no worse off.
Yeah. Staying in a job you hate. We have talked about this a little bit. The truth is there is nuance to it. If you've got kids, for example, of course, you'll be very careful. But I see a lot of people that say, I can't quit. What if I don't get a job again? And I say to you, what is a job? And this is really bad, but if you're working in a coffee shop and you've got a job, high chance you'll get another job in that coffee shop because there's a real shortage of people that work in retail. So, of course, you know, AI might come along, it might get harder. But most people, if they've got that sort of job, can get that job again. Just got to have a little bit of savings so you can pay your rent. If you're living at home, great. But if you just give yourself a bit of a runway and figure out what your income model is. Because this is another thing that's got a bit lost in this raise money world.
That's why I always say to people, start off with a side hustle, right? If you are doing a job, you shouldn't be doing 60, 70, 80 hours a week in that job. If you are, you've got your balance wrong, right? Especially if it's not a job that you love. But you have the capacity to be able to work that many hours if you really believed in something.
100%.
So start off as a side hustle. You build as a side hustle, and then if you get to the point whereby you're working 30, 40 hours a week in your side hustle, but you can see what it's delivering, then you can work out at what point can I give up work and flip the side hustle into the job. That way you are mitigating the risk. There's always a way to mitigate that risk. But I get it. And do you know what? Employers base their premise on the fact that if they can make you comfortable enough, you won't leave.
Yeah.
I have so many friends who are doing this. I remember one in particular, but she knew that the company she worked for were paying her so much it was going to be almost impossible for her to leave. And she was so miserable and she hated it. And I looked at her and I was like, is it really worth it? You're missing time with your kids. You're hating your life. You're fighting with your husband. Everything is just awful in your life because you're in this job that you hate. But they probably know you hate it, which is why they're just paying you over the odds so that you're never going to leave and go and do anything different.
The psychology is working for someone else is less risky than working for yourself.
Totally.
I think it's the opposite. Whereas if you have your own business...
people don't think that way, do they not?
But why is it that way around? How's that happened? How is it people... I'm sure people listening will be like, no, it's much more risky starting a business. 90% of businesses fail in the first year, which is what everyone says, which isn't true.
You're in control of it. You are in control of whether or not that business fails.
Surrounding yourself with the right people. Now, this is a big one. I'm 100% convinced I would not be successful today if I hadn't met my now wife when I was 23. 100%. Yep. Your partner is probably the biggest predictor of your future success.
Without a shadow of a doubt. And I used to joke, so I met Simon when I was 15. He always pushed me to be a better version of myself.
Same, yeah.
Without actively trying to, I just wanted to impress him that much. And he could see through me like a pane of glass. So I always wanted to be good enough. And I think that was what drove me. And I used to joke when I was in my early 20s, and I used to say, I'm basically just a carbon copy blueprint of a mix between me dad and Simon. And I like to think I've took the best bits of both of them. One of the strengths I think I have as an entrepreneur is that I'm not afraid to admit when I'm wrong. And I can hold the mirror on myself really well and tell you, these are all the things I'm the best in the world at doing. These are all of my weaknesses. And this is what I'll continue to work on. And so I can look at my dad, I can look at my husband, and I can choose to take the best bits of them. And I can choose to think, actually, and those are their behaviours and qualities that I don't want to take forward. I remember my leadership coach saying to me, Kirsty, she's absolutely ingenious and I wouldn't have got through the last 10 years of my life, my business career, without the advice that she's given me. And I do know one of the biggest things was we had a really challenging time in business a couple of years ago. And speaking to her and getting some advice of her then is she said, Sara, you can get the business through this. You can. You have the strength to be able to do it. However, you've got to avoid the people who are going to steal your positive energy. Because any days that you are in there and you are low energy, she said the whole of the rest of that business feeds off your energy. And if it's not there, they've got nothing to feed off. They're like vampire, they're going to feed off that energy. And I can remember at that time we had a couple of really big things, and one of them was we were struggling with a really big, like a lawsuit. And every time I got sucked into that, I got so pissed off. It drained all of my positive energy. It didn't matter what sort of a mood I was coming in on, I'd be in a horrendous mood by the middle of the afternoon. And so eventually I learned that I just need to remove myself from that. Even though it was a big thing going on in the business, I just said to my MD at the time, I said, you need to handle that. Because actually I'm not adding anything to that you can't cope without me, but what it's taking from me, the business can't afford for me not to have. So I need to just avoid that. Just protect your energy. Surround yourself with the right people at the right time. Simon is the biggest influence on my life, but sometimes he's not the right influence that I need, and I'll go and put the right influence in.
People listening to that, I hope they realise there'll be people in their lives that there's a perfect moment to be matched up with them. It's a good story to examine. There will be times when you just have to go match up with someone else for certain things. Finally, not backing yourself. You see this a lot, people aren't backing themselves. If they come in Dragon's Den and they haven't quit their job to focus on their business, that's an example, right?
What you'll find is none of the dragons have any time for anybody who is like that. And it's hard because I've got a little bit of empathy if they're doing it as a side hustle. But if they're not prepared, especially if they're going to have got the investment and then they're still not going to go forward, I just think, why would I back you if you're not going to back yourself? It's believing in yourself to throw yourself in there and do that. But also you've got to have the courage of your convictions. I talked a little bit earlier about the fact that, I made my millions with an envelope folding tool. I joke about it now sometimes and I say, you see, you can make money out of anything. I mean, how many of you out there watching are desperate to make your own envelopes, right?
More than you think. There'll be a lot. Let us know. Envelope in the comment, let us know.
But my market is a niche within a niche within a niche, right? But I could own that market. But the thing is, I genuinely believed that I was going to change the world for people who made cards. Even though that was a niche market, I believed so much that every person who made cards needed to own my product and their life was going to be better as a result of it. I didn't just tell myself it, I walk the walk as well as talk the talk. Because I believed that in myself, that oozed out of my every pore. When people come into the den, I can tell within 3 minutes if I'm going to make an offer on their business. Passion, vision, drive. That's what I'm backing. Passion, vision, drive. If you've got those, I'm all in. If you haven't got that, if you don't believe in yourself, I'm never going to believe in you. I'm wasting my time on you. And my time's the thing that's a finite resource. Not my money, it's my time. And I'm not going to put my time into somebody that isn't prepared to back themselves.
I think people listening, I always think how we can help them if they're not backing themselves. I mean, it's little symbols, isn't it? It's like, if you've got an idea, you have to dedicate more time to it than anything else. So when you're young, anyway, like if you're watching Netflix and you're going out with your mates at the weekend and you're not backing yourself, can just be allocating time to the priorities, going to the gym, eating well. Like it's just, initially it's got to start with you just looking after yourself, hasn't it?
Do you know, and I think it's all mindset. You choose what you're going to do. It's like you say, whether it's even going to the gym, looking after yourself, eating the right way, nurturing your body, whatever it is, you've got to choose to be of that positive mindset. And that's where I sometimes really struggle to help people who don't want to help themselves. If you've got a negative mindset, if you are one of those Nelly negatives who is, I can't do this. No, I'm not good enough at that. I'll never be good enough. I'm never going to get excited and try and change that mindset. You've got to want to change that mindset in yourself. And I'm not saying you have to go and be arrogant and a smart ass, but you have to absolutely have that self-belief before anybody else is going to get on board with taking it to the next level.
Thank you for sharing this knowledge with everyone today.
I've loved it.
Hope you guys enjoyed it. We're off to have some chicken now.
Chicken dinner.
This is what we do.
Winner, winner.
Yeah, exactly. We'll see you later. Thanks.